Fortnite's The Apocalypse Chapter 192 dropped a massive bombshell for the return of two of the members of the Seven Deadly Sins in the post-time skip story of the manga for Fortnite's The Apocalypse, and it was completely unexpected for how it was done, and I kind of commend it for it, but also leaves us with a lot of questions. And yes, I'm talking spoilers for the most recent manga chapter. Also, skip the video if you don't want to be spoiled, but then again, thumbnail and title is probably going to spoil it for you, but either way, if you don't want the details of me discussing through everything, click off now, catch up to the manga, then come back. Okay? Okay. So with the recent chapter of the manga, we get the reveal to 100% confirm Gawain is the actual child of Escanor and Merlin, two of the Seven Deadly Sins, but also that the two magical golem puppet things that Gawain basically had raising her, that she called Grandpa and Grandma, were actually Escanor and Merlin somehow. We all thought Arthur's stepbrother Kay was Gawain's biological father, but no, he was her foster father, raising her like his own, but never really had that much of a familial connection. He does care about her, as we've seen post-time skip with his talk with Percival, and even in the most recent chapter. But he isn't her actual father, it's Escanor and Merlin. And the biggest questions, outside of, how Gawain was born in the first place, is why are Escanor and Merlin magic golem doll puppet things? Great questions that'll most likely get answered within the next batch of chapters or by the end of this arc. Because, man, that was just a massive thing to drop in the middle of the chapter, because no one was really expecting that. Nakama kind of spoiled it in the chapter a few times with the color spread of that chapter for 192, and certain panels in that manga chapter, but there was hints of Merlin being involved, because Gawain stated that her grandma, the puppet that is Merlin now, taught her everything she knows about magic. And despite Gawain knowing all of the classic spells and elemental attacks and elemental spells that Merlin is known for using, while with also her proficiency to troll people using her magical abilities, and her prideful demeanor from Escanor, and sunshine powers from Escanor, we assumed that, yeah, she inherited some power of sunshine, or had sunshine altered for her, so it wouldn't kill her like Escanor. But we assumed that the grandma puppet golem thing was made, most likely by Merlin, to teach Gawain magic in her place. Because all we knew after chapter, I believe, 90 or 91, when we got the reveal that the Merlin that was next to Arthur the entire time in the sequel up until that point was just a fake that Arthur created, the big question was, where is Merlin? What's Merlin up to? Is she coming up with stuff to stop Arthur? Is she doing more research? Is she sealed away? We don't know. But now we seem to know. Obviously, with the whole teaching Gawain magic thing, we probably could have assumed something, but me and many others just assumed that Merlin made the grandma doll to teach Gawain in her stead. But no, Merlin was the doll. And now we see that Escanor and Merlin raised Gawain together, their own child, for the last 18 years. And it is crazy to really think about that, because from the end of Seven Deadly Sins to where all Fortnite's The Apocalypse were going to be born within that huge span of months, it is a tight, narrow thing for when Gawain can be born. Now, before we get into the whole Gawain being born thing, let's just talk about Escanor and Merlin being in magic dolls and interacting and doing stuff with Gawain. How did they get there in the first place? Now, Escanor, I think it could be simple, because going into the whole Merlin helping create Gawain thing through most likely magic purposes, she probably assumed it'd be best to have Escanor around to kind of keep the kid grounded, be the more responsible adult, which is, yeah, Escanor has prideful form, but without the arrogance of Sunshine, he's probably the most responsible member of the Sins. So having him around to raise his actual technical daughter would make sense. So it's very possible that in an attempt to help make sure Gawain wouldn't go, off the rails and kind of have some form of discipline and form of right and wrong, she would get Escanor from the necropolis, his soul from the afterlife, to come back. Now, we've seen magic to bring the dead back to life or to summon the souls of the deceased. That has been very clearly done in the series multiple times. Heck, we even saw it in the current manga during the Leonis arc when Melascula brought back Galen from the dead. But We don't know exactly how Merlin did so. All we can really guess is that she summoned Escanor's soul, and most likely with his permission, because even though Merlin does do some wild shit half the time, I don't think that she would bring Escanor back if Escanor was completely against being brought back. So she most likely took Escanor's soul with his consent and bound it to that skeleton animatronic doll thing for the purposes of helping to raise Gawain so she can use her powers, especially Dawn, which is most likely confirmed to be an alteration of Sunshine, to its fullest capabilities. And also to ground the kid to not be completely selfish. She did turn out to be a spoiled brat though, but she still has a sense of right and wrong for the most part. So okay, Escanor is the easiest person to place. His soul was brought back, placed in a doll to help raise Gawain. He most likely said yes to this. I can buy it. We just need a proper explanation, but I think that is the most likely case. Merlin is the big question mark. Why is she in this magic doll in the first place? Is she actually there, or is she technically dead? There are a few ways we can go about this. Because it's very heavily implied that Merlin was there for years, probably from the beginning, to help raise Gawain with Escanor. We don't know if she was the doll the entire time, but maybe she was kind of in the background. Maybe the doll did start out as a doll until Merlin possessed it. So we can think of the fact that either A, the doll is literally just a doll that Merlin is controlling remotely from a distance to help raise Gawain and not be caught by Arthur now that she disappeared. That's possible, but again, this is an 18-year time frame from seemingly like a year or two after Gawain was born to kind of help raise her almost universally every day. So that brings us to the fact that perhaps the doll could have just been a doll that was helping Escanor raise Gawain from the very beginning. But as Arthur slowly descended into madness with all cuckoo bananas thanks to chaos and all that stuff, Merlin feeling, in danger and not being able to keep Arthur in check for the time being, as a way to not only potentially find a way for Arthur to be brought back to the light, but also to, hide herself, she most likely ended up putting her spirit into the doll to help raise Gawain, teach her magic and all that stuff so she can be ready to maybe fight Arthur or stop him or whatever, or she can just be prepared for the future, all while being hidden from Arthur and potentially doing her own stuff in the background. That is likely possible. And Merlin taking her soul out of her body isn't a first for the series. Heck, we saw this in Seven Deadly Sins when she got turned to stone by Gawain after she lied to him and activated his commandment. She basically extracted her own soul and put it into her sacred treasure, and that could be the case. Merlin's sacred treasure can't do that. So it's very possible that Merlin, as a backup, found a way to have her sacred treasure within the doll, and then to kind of pull the wool over on Arthur, kind of disappear without a trace, hide her body and preserve it somewhere using her infinity magic to keep her body like the way it is, and then transferred her soul using her sacred treasure into her sacred treasure, and in turn possessing the doll. That way she can be up front and with Gawain over her formative years, while doing multiple stuff back and forth. Maybe when Gawain was asleep, Merlin went back to her body, continued her own research and planning stuff. For all we know, it's very strong, very likely that that's the case. So Merlin using this as a way to hide and help teach Gawain magic is very likely. I like the idea that Merlin just plucked her soul out of her body, put it into her sacred treasure, had that in the doll to hide from Arthur, and kind of do all that. I think that would make a lot more sense as to how she's evaded Arthur for so long. Either that or she's been controlling the doll remotely, but I think her possessing the doll in that manner with the real-time reactions and speak is the most likely case scenario. Now, Gawain being born, we've talked about this a few times. I'm still going for the fact that Gawain was made as a type of magical homunculus, or a test tube baby, using the DNA of Escanor and Merlin to create a child together. Obviously, Merlin probably took something from Escanor, maybe it was a piece of Sunshine, and maybe had some of his DNA, and thus wanted to kind of keep Sunshine in the world, for whatever reason, and kind of throw her own stuff in there, maybe as a way to apologize to Escanor, or something like that. I still need a good reason as to why Merlin made a child with Escanor, technically. I need a reason, because it was very clear that she didn't like Escanor like that. Maybe she heard of the prophecy from the Lady of the Lake to help stop Arthur, and they needed a fourth Night of Prophecy, and it can only be done with someone with Escanor's power, so Merlin brought that into her own hands, and thus Gawain was born. That's very possible, very likely. We still need to know the details. I have confidence that Nakba will give us a concrete answer for that as well, same with Merlin and Escanor being in the dolls, but I think that might be the best case scenario for now, at least from what's coming from my head at the time, but obviously things could be vastly, vastly different. But that leaves us to one last question. Why hide their identities from Gawain? That is the interesting question. One of Gawain's big points of her character, one of her big questions of life, is where did she come from and who her mother is, why she can't feel love, why is she attracted to women. We all know this. This is key, integral parts of her character and her journey. And this has been shown to help her develop, especially in the most recent fight by the time it ended. Now we know that Escanor and Merlin have been supporting Gawain over the years, telling her how strong she is, how great she is, that she is the strongest there is, feeding into her very impressionable ego, thus kind of giving her, a strong impression of herself. And that kind of goes to show Escanor would definitely spoil his own kid to that degree, and Merlin would probably just go along with it to kind of not make Gawain angry. But I think the reason why they don't want Gawain knowing that, that Escanor and Merlin are the true identities of her grandparents, but also the fact that they are her actual parents, I think a good portion of it would be to kind of hide that fact from Arthur. Granted, I don't think Arthur's stupid. He probably assumed something was up with Gawain, using the same tactics and magical skills as Merlin, and heck, even seeing her in an outfit most likely similar to Merlin's and Escanor's. But who knows in that regard. Now, Merlin kind of mentioned that Gawain would be disappointed learning that her grandparents would be her parents. I said in the chapter review that if she learned that her parents were two of the legendary 7 deadly sins, that would inflate her ego to such a big degree, fully feeding her own self-image and how she's the strongest, proving that she's the strongest, then family drama for keeping it hidden. But who knows? That could have been partly the case. They probably saw Gawain as super impressionable, and if they told her that her parents were two of the legendary 7 deadly sins, she would probably say it for all to hear, and it would kind of screw up potentially Merlin's plans and the future of the Four Knights of the Apocalypse. Who knows? That could be the case, or maybe Merlin did something that kind of also ended up with Arthur being the way that he is, and maybe that's why she would think Gawain would be disappointed in her, and maybe Escanor. I mean, Escanor maybe because he's not the super prideful, incredibly powerful legend that he used to be, but Escanor is just a really nice guy. I don't think Gawain would have much of a problem with Escanor after realizing that. But the reason for them keeping their identities a secret is definitely something to call into question. I'm not sure of a good reason besides trying to hide it from Arthur, but there's also the possibility, why hide this from the rest of the sins? Because that's also something we have to think about. If Merlin and Escanor are on this mortal coil alive, Escanor kind of still a ghost, and Merlin maybe a ghost, but they're still around and they helped raise one of the Knights of Prophecy, I feel like Merlin, knowing Arthur has gone off the deep end, would have notified the sins, and I feel like Escanor would have wanted to tell the sins that he's kind of back again, but then again, I don't know how this could end up being the case. Heck, for all we know, Kay might have raised Gawain for a good chunk of her life, and then eventually, when Arthur went crazy, Merlin did the whole doll transformation thing, possessed the doll to help raise Gawain, brought Escanor back to raise Gawain as well, being loving, supportive grandparents, and that could have been for a couple of years for all we know, but it's still very iffy, and I don't know where things fall into place at this point. But I do think we'll get some satisfying answers. But yeah, that's my current thoughts on the recent chapter and reveal for Four Knights of the Apocalypse with Escanor and Merlin being back. No idea how all this is possible. There are some clear ideas that I gave in this video, but what do you guys think happened? How do you think Escanor and Merlin are in this current situation? How do you think Gawain was born in the first place? And why do they keep their identities a secret from her to begin with? Let me know in the comment section down below. And once more, if you haven't already, like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for updates on future videos. Really helps, and it shows you guys you like the content I make here on the channel. It shows you want to see more. I'm going to try and bring back these types of discussion and theory videos whenever I get the chance, out either in replacement of the comment discussion videos that I'm trying to do, or alongside them. It depends on my schedule and how I can get these videos done between chapters. But yeah, let me know if you guys enjoyed this type of video, and let me know if you want me to keep doing them. And with all that said and done, hope you all have an awesome day.